everybody here today, and I'm glad you came in. I know we did a gig Wednesday. I'm sorry you missed that, Bernadette. Well, I think we've got a fix for that, though. We're going to do a little bit of a review today, too, on what Sheldon talked about, because after I kind of got finished with him, I kind of went over some notes and looked at some things. And keep in mind, too, he's open for anybody to, ping him if you have any questions or if you saw something on the video you want to expound on. But I'm going to push it a little bit further today, and we're going to look at a couple of things. I know I sent you the Becker thing, and that's good, and we'll do that. But I want to be able to deconstruct what Sheldon talked about. But let's jump into here first. I got a couple of things. I thought it would be nice to start by doing, like, every time we get in here, we should kind of, I'd like us to interact and share some ideas here, and something along these lines. Let me just share this with you. I think I told you that years and years ago, I got turned on to Charles Bukowski, the poet. And I love this. I love this piece he wrote here. He said, "I see men assassinated around me every day. I walk through the rooms of the dead, streets of the dead, and cities of the dead. Men without eyes, men without voices, men and women, of course, with manufactured feelings and standard reactions. Men with newspaper brains, television souls, and high school ideas." I love that. I think, and again, trying to give yourself some room to interpret these ideas, these theories through artists that have come and gone, like Bukowski. Really, really powerful stuff here. So he's talking about observing this phenomenon in people. He doesn't say this, but I'll interpret this for him. People who are so afraid of dying psychologically outside of their consciousness, they are afraid to live. So they kind of walk around. This is my own interpretation, by the way. I don't take anything from anybody. All of this is just my own kind of churning on the words and ideas and the context of it all. But he's talking about culturally constructed meat puppets, tranquilizing with the trivial, and seeing these kind of automatons, these culturally constructed meat puppets walking around. Bukowski put down, as a misogynist, as a sexist, and he probably was, I don't know, he probably might have been all those things. I have to kind of separate myself from the artist and their lifestyle some of the time, not all the time. But anyway, I wanted to share that. So here's something everyone knows about, I'm sure, in the US. These school shootings are constant. They are absolutely constant. We don't do anything about them, thoughts and prayers is what we send, and they don't seem to be doing much of anything. So I wanted to share this with you about the Georgia gunman, a young boy, Colton Gray, 14 years old. He was ridiculed and called gay by bullies at school. It appears the teen had fantasized about carrying out a mass murder for years. The 2023 Discord post that caught the attention of the FBI read, "I'm committing a mass shooting, and I'm waiting a good 2 to 3 years. I can't kill myself yet because I'm not contributing anything to culture. I need to go out knowing that I did." So that, to me, that is straight down the alley of what we talk about here quite a bit, about this urge to be significant, right? And so when these kids, these people, lose track and lose sight of what's going on as far as self-esteem goes and the people around them, those kinds of things happen. So I wanted to share a real life example of that. Everybody kind of knows, but that last line, I'm not contributing anything to culture. I need to go out knowing I did. That's the key word there. So look for these things, I listen to music all the time, so I'm constantly hearing lyrics. I'm constantly introduced to artists that are presenting death anxiety and terror management work, and they don't frame it in those terms. And that's what I think it'd be interesting to come to in this group, is having people understand what is going on that way. Michael Wellman, good to see you. I love that too. He knows what's going on, of course, today. Oh, Bukowski, yeah, he knows what was going on, of course, today. You would have to add staring at your smartphone like it was a beacon of joy. Yeah, that's a good one, Michael. Yes, add that to the long list of distractions we have to keep our minds off of, like Becker says, the refusal of reality. So if you're not seeing the world this way, or you can't see the world as it is, you obviously have implemented some coping mechanism to paint the world in a certain way so that you can consume it and live in it, get up and function. Because if we didn't paint it a certain way, we couldn't do that. Let's do a Sheldon Solomon review. Because after I put all that together, I listened to his talk again, and I read his emails, and I wanted to come up with a couple of key points that I thought were really fascinating that Sheldon shared with us. And I haven't gotten to these points yet, but this is a great introduction to these two. So creating art is a rebellious act. The artist is pushing against their culture. So when Sheldon, I brought up the question about Otto Rank, talking about when the artist creates work, there's an element of that work that really goes against the culture he or she or they are pushing against. Now, the problem with these ideas, so much of the time it happens outside the consciousness, that when you don't, like Jung said, make the unconscious conscious, and you won't live your life, and then call it fate. You'll be able to direct your life to some degree. So when you pull these things into consciousness and you say, wow, I'm creating this work and I'm making a statement about something in my culture that a certain segment, maybe a large segment of my culture, will not like. And that creates problems, because an artist generally creates work to satisfy their culture, right? So when we talk about building our self-esteem and having cultural worldviews or meaning systems, I like the words meaning system a little bit better, because people tend to find that's easier to understand than cultural worldviews, right? That the whole kind of academic view of it. But a meaning system, when you find a meaning system that you can cling to, that is usually in good graces with your culture, right? So doing a good job at work, raising your family, whatever, being the president of your sports club fan, or whatever it is, those kind of good graces, even following the speed limit and obeying the laws and not acting out in public, all those things fall in good graces your culture, and that's what we're usually after. Well, here's the artist sitting in their studio or out on location or wherever they're at, and they're saying, wow, I've got this desire to create something, but it's going to push against culture. It's going to, maybe a good example I could use, I'm going to use one here that you guys will absolutely understand because it's kind of universal. But for those of you that knew who Robert Mapplethorpe was, the photographer, he pushed against culture in a major, major way, both in the context of time, the context of his images, the stuff around his whole thing. Oh, there's Chris. There you go. That's Robert Mapplethorpe. Yeah, there you go. Self-portrait. Excellent. Wonderful. And if you don't know who he is, you should look him up. But he's kind of a classic example of someone knowing good and well. He got banned, I think it was in Cleveland, Ohio, out of a museum, and he was ridiculed constantly. a gay man making homoerotic kind of art or sexually charged gay photographs, if you will. I don't know how you'd even term it, but that's what the public saw. What the people who knew him and who knew what he was doing, he was a classic example of this artist pushing against their culture. So remember, for us to gain self-esteem as artists, our personal lives are usually in good graces with our culture, meaning that our meaning systems go along with our culture, whatever it is. We do the things in our culture that our culture likes us to do, and we're rewarded for that through the bolstering of self-esteem. That self-esteem bolstered repels or represses death anxiety. So we feel good. We don't think about death. Life is great. I love getting up in the morning, all that kind of good stuff. So that's the first thing. Just the creating art is a rebellious act, and the artist is pushing against their culture. So that's the first stage in what my question to Sheldon was. Now, Otto Rank goes on to say, this creates existential guilt. Now, you probably have never heard of existential guilt. I hadn't until I read Becker and Rank. But this is, I'm going to give you an example of an artist going out with an artist with existential guilt. But I love this, what Sheldon said. He says, you're going out on a proverbial limb creating art. And the artist would not be compelled to create art if they had psychological equanimity. You guys know what that means? It means we wouldn't create art if everything was okay up here, right? You say, oh no, Sally painted a rose because it was pretty. Okay, fair enough. On the surface, fair enough. But why would Sally need to render something that way? There's something psychologically, equanimity means balance or comfort or, whatever word you want to use there. Why would this be out of tune with painting a rose? Well, there's something there. That's up to the artist, whatever the artist is imbalanced about, right? I could sit here for the next 40 minutes and rattle for 40 minutes the things in my culture that I can make art about, that I just don't have time in my life to do it. I've selected the things that I want and I feel are the most powerful and the most meaningful to me to communicate about. So whatever the artist is struggling with, you're making art based on your imbalance, psychologically speaking. Not saying you're mentally ill, not saying nothing like that. And maybe we're all kind of mentally ill, right? But you're making art because something's out of balance. Something is not happening up here that gives you comfort. There would be no need to create art if everything was kosher and legitimate. That is a powerful, powerful point to keep out of the unconscious and bring it into consciousness as an artist. That's what these things are really important to understand, right? Because if we don't start deconstructing these things, even as artists, we're just going to run on autopilot. That's what we do. We may pursue our passions. We may pursue the things that we love or dislike or have questions about, whatever it is, but we're still kind of running on autopilot. So, existential guilt. So having clarified those two things, I hope those were easy enough to understand. That produces what Otto Rank called existential guilt. So if you took those two words and you said, what existentialism is, about existing, about being, the ontological question, if you will, and then you put guilt. We know what guilt is. So you have guilt about existing. You've heard of survivor's guilt in accidents, of plane crashes, and why did I survive and the rest of my friends or family did, whatever it is, right? Survivor's guilt. Well, he called this existential guilt. Let me see if I can break this down for you using probably one of the best examples that I can think of, and we'll get to that in the next page here. But this is what Rank said. He's just to reiterate, he's a psychoanalyst, a student of Freud, right? One of Freud's disciples. He explored existential themes in his work, particularly around creativity, individuality, and death. Rank saw creativity as central to the human experience and to the way individuals cope with awareness of mortality. He introduced the idea of existential guilt in relation to the creative process and an individual's struggle for self-realization. So I'm sure everyone here knows about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the steps of Maslow. Becker talks about Maslow and the denial of death as well, too. But Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right at the top of that pyramid is self-actualization. This is different. We're not talking about self-actualization here. We're talking about self-realization. And so let's go on, just to clarify that. We're not talking about Maslow's self-actualization. For Rank, existential guilt arises when a person becomes aware of the conflict between their unique creative individuality and the constraints of society, tradition, or external expectations, or culture, right? We call it culture or meaning system. So once the artist becomes aware, I'm making art, or I'm making work that's going to ruffle some people's feathers, or some people aren't going to like this, or whatever. Once you become aware of that, this is where the guilt starts to come in. You can actually read, and Chris probably has read, you can actually read about Mapplethorpe, and you can read about Warhol, Mapplethorpe, Richard Avedon, Deanne Arbus, Mary Ellen Mark, Donna Ferrato. I could sit here and name 1,000 artists and photographers that have talked about existential guilt, but not this clearly. So just keep that in mind. And as you run across, or you start reading biographies of artists, or see documentaries about artists, listen, parse those words carefully in the context through the lens of death anxiety and terror management. And I guarantee you, every single time, you're going to say, oh my God, he's talking about terror management theory there. He's talking about death anxiety there. He's talking about things in his culture that he's making art about, that he's going against their culture, kind of thing. So anyway, for Rank, existential guilt arises when a person becomes aware of the conflict between their unique creative individuality and the constraints of society, tradition, or external expectations. The artist, in particular, feels this guilt intensely because they challenge the status quo and create something new, often at the expense of conformity. So going against the culture. This act of breaking free from the established norms and asserting one's individuality carries with it a sense of guilt for rejecting collective values and the safety of belonging. You say, wait a minute, Quinn, I know people who actively try to piss people off, that actively go try to throw Molotov cocktail bombs into situations. Yes, this is different. This is a deeply thinking, connected artist trying to make work about their concerns, their existential concerns, usually about something in their culture that they're trying to either get out and express to get rid of that anxiety, or they're trying to push for social change. And a lot of times both, actually. Existential guilt, in Rank's view, also connects to the awareness of mortality. The artist's drive to create is a form of defiance against death, an attempt to leave a legacy or a mark on the world. There it is again, right? Symbolic immortality. The young kid shot up the school the other day. I need to leave I haven't contributed. I need to know that before I kill myself. I need to know that that's all, that I've left a mark. Same with the artist here, right? Going against death, an attempt to leave a legacy or mark on the world. But this striving for immortality can never fully overcome the human condition of impermanence, leading to an underlying guilt for daring to transcend what is ultimately finite. So not only are you going against, in Rank's view, not only are you going against your culture, right? You may live in a conservative culture or or maybe a liberal culture, whatever the conditions, and you're pushing against something in that, not only are you going against that, but you're also punching at death, saying, no, you don't win. You do not win. I'm going to overcome this through symbolic immortality. So you're rebelling against both of those, producing what Rank calls existential guilt. The artist experiences existential guilt for both rejecting societal norms and for the impossible pursuit of immortality through creation. Right there. Creativity becomes a means of confronting death anxiety, but it also reminds the artist of their limitations and mortality, intensifying this guilt. The tension between individual creativity and the constraints of mortality is at the heart of Rank's existential understanding of the artist's psychological and emotional life. So that, I hope that is a good example of or explanation of that. So let's just use Vincent van Gogh. This is somebody even the average person knows, let alone artists. I think most artists at least know something about him. What's an example of an artist experiencing existential guilt? Look at the life and work of Vincent van Gogh, particularly in how he struggled with isolation, self-doubt, and the societal implications of his creative path. So Van Gogh's life was marked by a deep sense of alienation. Maybe I'm speaking out of turn here, but I don't know how many of you guys feel like you're kind of the oddball out or haven't not quite fit into all these kinds of situations you find yourself in. That's my life. And I can fake it. I can put a mask on. I can do all that. Everybody can, right? Sometimes we have to, just out of courtesy. I don't like to, but I could probably walk into most any party and piss everybody off and leave in about 5 minutes. But Chris said Matt Smith, Doctor Who, did a movie about him. About Robert Mapplethorpe. Oh, thanks for that, Chris. I just saw that note. Chris just told us that Matt Smith, Doctor Who, did a movie about Mapplethorpe. I will look that up. Thank you for sharing that. But back to this existential guilt. That sense of isolation. Pete, I know I feel that. And I think, I'm not saying all artists do, but there is something about being on this path of, I don't know why I'm the way I am. Maybe it is spinach. No, it sounded like Popeye there for a second. I don't know why I am the way I am. I don't know why I am the way I am. I do know that I love to create. I love to get that feeling of, what I always used to call, satisfaction. And I now know it's self-esteem, and it's regulating and managing my existential dread. I get that. I feel it deep in my bones. But I think I'm pretty typical of the average artist or creative person that doesn't quite feel like they fit in all the time everywhere. They chose a path that distanced them from, this is written in, sexist kind of terms, distanced them from the conventional society, embracing an artistic vision that was often misunderstood or rejected during their lifetime. They felt guilt for not adhering to a more traditional, we're talking about Van Gogh. Van Gogh, let me start again. I got lost. Van Gogh's life was marked by a deep sense of alienation. He chose a path that distanced him from conventional society, embracing an artistic vision that was often misunderstood or rejected during his lifetime. He felt guilt for not adhering to a more traditional life, just as pursuing stable work or conforming to societal expectations of success. Let me stop there for just a second. Can you guys think of any examples today where you see the kind of the opposite of Van Gogh? And I need to use what we're all fairly close to, is the process of wet collodion. So have you ever seen, or if you go out on social media or correspond with people, and what you'll start seeing real quickly is you'll see a bunch of people not always photographers or artists either, people getting into the process. And what's the first thing they do? They start emulating other people. They start copying other people's work. So in a way, yes, they're trying to learn the process and they're trying to do this or that, but you'll see them eventually get all the same equipment, get all the same formulas, get all the same recipes, right? And they bring it down to this very standard, what we call fish in a barrel, right? Shooting fish in a barrel. The old idiom, you walk up to a barrel, it's not very hard to catch or shoot a fish in a barrel. So you'll see that. That's the opposite of what Van Gogh was doing. That's why he suffered existential guilt. So what are some examples today in contemporary wet collodion that we could offer up as a Van Gogh kind of model? Going the opposite direction, not having any tintype pop-up studios with Speedotron strobes and, this particular lens and this particular recipe of collodion. They've got it really for me, and that's great. But you know what? They're doing that for money, right? Van Gogh talks about, he's not in it for the conventional mode. Would he want to sell paintings? Yeah. His brother Theo actually sold one, maybe two, I don't know. But he would have liked to done that, but they rejected his work. It wasn't like everybody else's, right? It was aesthetically outrage for the viewer, right? For the common viewer then. So that's what he was struggling against. So such as pursuing stable work or conforming to societal expectations of success. That's what threw me off on that binge. His letters reveal a man torn between his need to create and the personal cost of that creativity, such as financial instability, mental health struggles, and strained relationships. Man, I haven't had any strained relationships from this, but I can definitely relate to the other two items on that list for sure, in some ways. This isolation is an embodiment of Ranke's existential guilt. Van Gogh's choice to devote himself to art resulted in a deep personal price. He wrestled with his desire to contribute something meaningful and lasting to the world through his paintings, but he also felt guilty for rejecting a more normal path in life. I think that's a pretty fair assessment. So we have that. So as artists or creative people, we have a couple of dilemmas going on here. So confronting mortality through creation, and this he did this. He if you go back and visit his work, I've been fortunate enough. I lived in Europe, and I was fortunate enough to spend time. I've been to Amsterdam quite a bit, and I've gone through his museums and been in Paris, spent a lot of time in Paris. Got to see a lot of his work there, and even in Italy, got to see a lot of his work in the Firenze, Florence area, and museums there. So fortunately, I've got to see a lot of his work, and you can see this in his work, even looking at it online and reading about him. But let's see. Michael said something here. Sally Mann is the first person I can think of who might fall into the Van Gogh. Yeah, I would agree with that, Michael, to some extent. Yes. Here's the problem, and I love Sally Mann, I really do. But here's the problem. I went to her show at the Gasconian in New York, a really ritzy Manhattan area, right? Big gallery there. And we walk in there, and I was hoping to see some prints, or some plates, but what I saw was silver gelatin prints printed on from kind of bright ambrotypes, maybe even not bright ambrotypes, but these were like 15 by 15 inch square prints, silver gelatin framed on the beautiful. I mean, gorgeous photographs. Then I walked out and I grabbed one of the catalogs, and the least expensive print, silver gelatin print in that show was $22,000 US. So I'm not sure that she would fall completely, but I think I agree with you, Michael, in spirit. she was probably definitely her soul and her whatever's in there, her drive. And God bless her for making a bunch of money and being famous and rich and all that. That's great. But her drive, I think, I would agree with you, is fairly straightforward. But it's us little peons that nobody knows who we are and all that stuff, and we struggle with that. She has her own set of problems now, but because of her success. But confronting mortality through creation. This is, again, let's go back to Van Gogh and jump into his issues a little deeper here. Van Gogh's work can also be seen as an attempt to confront his own mortality 100%. He poured himself into his paintings, capturing the vibrant and often chaotic energy of life. Yet, at the same time, he was keenly aware of his own mental and physical decline, a reminder of the limitations of the human condition. His paintings, such as The Starry Night, with their swirling, intense skies, reflect a cosmic perspective on life and death, suggesting an inner turmoil about the impermanence of existence. I agree 100%. Van Gogh's awareness of his own fragile state could have intensified a sense of existential guilt, as his drive to create something lasting through his art was a defiance of mortality. He strove for artistic immortality, but was painfully aware that this pursuit was ultimately futile in the face of death. So people talk a lot about his dying by suicide. You know, he shot himself in the chest or in the stomach area somewhere, and he took 2 or 3 days to die. A lot of people talk about him slicing off his ear, you know, and Gauguin and hit, you know, there were speculations that they were gay and having a relationship and all that stuff. I don't know anything about that, but I do know that he did definitely struggle with his culture. And he's a great example of existential guilt. And then absolutely in society's eyes at the time, he was a failed artist, quote unquote. And then at his own understanding, I'm sure at the end, he knew what was up. And his final act. In his final years, Van Gogh's mental health deteriorated and he took his own life. His suicide could be interpreted as the ultimate manifestation of existential guilt. Despite his efforts to overcome his internal struggles through artistic creation, the weight of isolation, failure, and the inescapable awareness of death may have proven overwhelming. In his life and work, we can see how the artist grapples with the existential guilt that Ronk described, feeling torn between his individuality and the demands of society. There it is again. As well as the tension between the desire for immortality through art and the inevitability, reality of death, dying, right? These are, so what we're talking about here is we're talking about coming up against these conflicts as artists, psychological conflicts, right? Usually happening outside of our consciousness, so we don't even know it's happening. That's the biggest thing about these theories, is people just don't even know they're happening because they're so wrapped up in their worldviews and their meaning systems, they don't know what's going on. I don't think she was trying to copy anyone, but marching to her own create. Yes, that she definitely was for 100%. Even, you know, I was turned on to her in undergraduate school, her family work, right, in the late 80s. And even that, you know, remember the photograph of her daughter with a cigarette and stuff, you know, that existential guilt a little bit there, right? I mean, you know, in the 80s, we still had, you know, satanic panic and very, you know, very conservative. This culture was 40, 45 years ago, much more than it is today. But I agree with you, Michael. Yes. So that is existential guilt. So let's talk about just a little bit about this paper. I was going to go into it, and then I decided. I'm sorry.
Well,
yes, please.
Before you start the next part.
No, go for it. This is nothing. So let's go on.
Well, okay, I've been writing a couple of things because the term artist, this is where a lot of this disconnect and strangeness comes from me with the term artist, because you have a lot of people that are artists. Okay, I hope I can explain how I'm thinking about this. They're
Take your
artists,
time. You're fine. Yeah, no worries.
but they say they're technically incredible artists. And they're doing work. I know that around here we have a lot of that. I couldn't even name anybody around here that does like really kind of different or interesting art. So they do a lot of birds and barns and the bay and boats and it's technically it's done really well. So where do you say, and I don't think that these people feel like they're going against culture. I feel like they're going with the flow of culture, our culture in this state. So how do you say somebody's an artist or not? This is where I get really confused. You know,
Okay.
Are they artists? They're still doing something technically beautiful, and everybody says, "Oh, have you seen da da da's work? You know, this
Right.
artist in the little local gallery. It's so great. They're artists."
Yeah.
When do you see? Do you understand? Do you guys understand where my confusion is?
I'll put my 2 cents in, and then other people can jump in here. Here's the thing. You're absolutely spot on, Bernadette. You're absolutely spot on. There's a big difference, and words are meaningful, right? We need to parse the words. We need to find the words we want to use, and so we know the meaning and the definition of them. So the ultimate thing we're trying to do here is have our work. I'm trying to turn this damn light off. There. Yeah, I'm still all right. So here's the difference. We use this word artist arbitrarily. We should. I've always defined, and I know you've watched a few of my technical videos, Bernadette, so you know this. I've always tried to define over the last 30, 40 years that there's a difference between a commercial artist, a craftsman and technician, and a fine art, personal art person, right? People. So let me define those. Personal fine art person like myself and most of you in here, I'm sure, is a person who is creating work because they're compelled to. They have a desire. They're along the lines of the traditional, like I'm making work that's my own, that's unique, that's from these ideas, that's from whatever it is. And am I interested in money? Not so much. I'm more interested in relieving this existential dread and understanding what I'm doing. Then there's the technician and craftsman. And you have to have the technician and craftsman along those skills along with your personal fine art work, right? So you need to understand. I thought it was great. Sheldon gave this example. I had a buddy walk in with a saxophone. He says, "Yeah, I'm going to be Miles Davis in a week," kind of thing, or whoever. I can't remember the musician he gave. "I'm going to be this famous saxophone player musician in a week," right? He said, "No, you're not." And so there's this old saying, 10,000 hours. So don't discount the craftsman and the technician, right? They're not over here with us bearing our souls about how bigotry is driving us up the wall and this injustice in the world, we can't bear it. It weighs on us heavily. They're not doing that. They're just really good. Man, look at how real that bird looks. Look at how wonderful that pot of roses or whatever it is, right? This kind of innocuous, aesthetically pleasing. God, they might even sell some stuff. They're tchotchkes and kitsch art at the local fair kind of thing. That's who you see there, right? The technicians and craftsmen. And then there's the commercial artist. Now, this person can blend in all the other two, all the way down. I've had people challenge me. Sorry, I'm going to reduce this. I've had people challenge me saying, "Oh, Quinn, so you don't want to sell your work, huh?" And I said, "Well, you know what? If I showed you the number the dollar number of the amount of work I've sold in my life, you would not believe me, number one. And number two, your jaw would drop and hit the floor. So am I interested in selling work? Not at the time I'm making it. Am I interested in selling work if it's in an exhibition or a show or so? Sure. I mean, my first exhibition I had at Ruth Lubbard's gallery in Salt Lake, Art Access Gallery. I had a wet collodion show there in 2005 or 2005, I think, 2005 or 6. And Ruth asked me, very nice lady, owned the gallery. She gave me both galleries, a great big, huge gallery. And I had set up in the back my cameras and videos and stuff showing the process. And then in the front were all the images and the statements. And she said, "Oh, you don't have anything up here for sale." I said, I don't want to sell anything. I want to introduce people to these ideas and what I'm doing. A little taken back by that, right? Because we're in the standard mode of money is such a huge cultural component. So the commercial artists make most people today in wet collodion are commercial people. They want to make money making images, portraits normally, and then they'll try to sell, art, their art images and things like that. So there's a real distinction between those. There's three categories for me. There's personal fine art, no money, no fame, no glory, but a strong justice, social component for me to that. There's number two, the technician and craftsman. I can make a wet collodion image. I think I understand the chemistry pretty well. I think I understand all that stuff. I've been doing it for a week or two. So I've got my hours in there. So I can pretty much technically pull anything off photographically in that area you want. So that becomes an important tool for me over here as a personal fine art person. The commercial component can come after, right? It can come after. So in my shows in Paris, 2010 and 2012, I sold an incredible amount of work. I don't even want to, doesn't matter. I sold Coltrane. Thank you, Jeffrey. I got a saxophone. I'm going to be Coltrane in a week. You need your time. But yeah, so those are my takes. Anybody else on Bernadette's question or like, yeah, Jeffrey.
Just on that note, because when I started, especially just getting into art in general before I've even gone to wet plate, I just like doing it for myself. Because I remember when I took part in a show and they wanted a price for it, and I just said not for sale. But then the following year they said no, you have to put a price, and I didn't want to sell my plates, so I just put a really high price. But the damn thing sold. Because every time I make work, I like to keep it for myself, and that's why I have to make all these boxes because I don't. But then now, like I've been taking other art fairs, if you will, that okay, I'm making this especially to sell. Like it doesn't really have. I don't really have any attachment to it. So I'll just do multiple plates of because I do a lot of still life as well. So with that intent, I go like, okay, I'll make sure I try to sell these. If they go, whatever, I don't really care. But
yeah,
so I don't know if
that's great. I think people think I'm a real hard ass when it comes to this kind of commercial versus art thing. And hey, man, if you sell your work, do it. I mean, absolutely do. I have nothing against. I'm born and raised in a capitalist society. I get people want to commodify everything. I understand that, right? At this point in my life, I'm a little turned off by all of it. I'm just kind of sick of the whole commerce thing. I don't want any, man, I get 2 or 3 emails a month from YouTube saying, monetize this, monetize, you have 35,000 followers, monetize this, make a reel, and I know most people are wanting to do that, but I don't have any interest in it. So if you want to do commercial, that's a great example. Do it, man. Sell some work, pay for your chemistry, pay for your equipment, 2 thumbs up. I'm talking about the personal fine artwork down here for me is this is a personal endeavor connected to my experiences as a young boy and in my life, how I grew up, and questions that I had around these ideas of othering and marginalized communities. So for me, it was more, like you said, more of a personal pursuit. I will add one thing. Jeffrey said something interesting there. I always made work for myself. And that's what you're doing, right? You are doing that. And there's a little bit of a breakdown here. So do I have photographs that no one has ever seen? A lot of photographs no one has ever seen. I've got thousands, 1,000 plates, maybe more. I don't know. I got a lot of photographs, 20 plus years of making these things. So there's a lot of work that's made. Just either you're exercising, you're flexing your creative or craftsman and technician muscle, or you're saying, hey, I do want to get out on this commercial bent. I need to make a little money. So let's pop over here. Collodion and ether and plates and all this stuff is expensive. I'm all for that. I'm talking about intention, right? So what I don't like to see are people blurring these lines. People coming in completely commercial, and they might not even have the technical or craftsmanship down, completely commercial, and then laying over that commercial bent this personal fine art thing. And it's not. They can't talk about why they make the photographs. They can't talk about the photographs themselves. They really don't know the technical reasons or the why you chose this or why you chose that. They haven't thought through anything. They've copied work, emulated work, and then want to go out and try to sell it. And so most people in the world today think successful artists are people who make money, when in fact they're not. In fact, the best creative people in my mind are people you've never ever heard of. I mean, that's how it happens, right? So if you know some of the big names, right? Sally Mann, Richard Avedon, tons of painters and sculptors and filmmakers and all kinds of stuff, and that's all great. But at the end of the day, my big bent is please don't conflate or confuse, like Bernadette's talking about, calling yourself an artist, but you paint roses and you sell them at the state fair for $100 a pop, right? You're a commercial artist and you're talented, man. Your realism is awesome, or and that's what you always see. You always see these old barns in the field and the roses and my God, I always use the example of, if I see another photograph of El Capitan in Yosemite, I'm going to pull my hair out. People go up there and put their tripod holes in where Ansel Adams was, right? I mean, this is an exercise in terror management, because we as human beings, when we look up to someone, when we see this rock star or movie star or famous artist, we want to be close to them because we feel they possess some kind of immortality. They're not going anywhere. They're so big. They're like a god. And I want some of that. So we attach ourselves to them. And then one day we see him and oh my God, they're not a god. They died. They're sick. And Becker calls it, they have clay feet, meaning they're not a god. They're not a deity. So we like to cling to these really famous people and adore them and all that kind of stuff. So people making commercial artwork are usually really technically strong, like Bernadette said, oh, that's a pretty rose, that's a pretty bird, that's whatever it is. And people say, transfer it over into any of the disciplines, right? I play 3 chords on the guitar, C, G, and D, and I write these silly songs, and I do like everybody else, right? 3 chords, write a song. Get a wet plate camera, buy a kit, and I've read so many articles about Joey Smith has saved this old photographic process, somewhere in Indiana or something, right? They have no clue this stuff. It's never gone away in 150 years, right? But they love it's hype. They don't know about it. They're in Podunk, Indiana, so this person's revived this process, and they've been, they bought a kit and a little 4x5 camera, and they've been doing it for about 3 months. But they get depressed because it's something different. So these things are problems, right, for creative people and trying to navigate the waters of this stuff. And it is. It's a problem that I try not to pay too much attention to. People bring it up to me all the time by email and asking me questions about what I think about this. I don't know. I don't know what I think about a lot of the stuff. But to me, I don't really care. If they want to make, if you know, the problem, I guess I do care a little bit. The problem for me comes when I'm trying to separate myself. When they, oh, you're an artist. Oh, what do you do? You know, they want me to say, oh, I paint old barns and fields with a mountain scene behind them, right? Or I paint roses, and you know, and now, God, what do I tell them? Wow, I'm really interested in these in marginalized community, people who are treated poorly or pushed aside or whatever. I'm really interested in this psychological phenomenon, and I want to make art about it. And they, okay, see you later. You know, and that's fine, because like Jeffrey said, my rant was I make work for myself, and I make a lot of work for myself. And ultimately, I thought it was interesting what Sheldon said. He said in their clinical studies, when they go in and they have artists make work, and it's shared socially or it's not shared, there's a big difference in what's meaningful or not, and how much buffering for existential dread they get. So I am convinced. My position is this: we make art first for ourselves, to relieve this whatever. Man, I got to do something. I got to you know, and relieve that. And then secondly, if your work has some kind of central theme or message or something you want to communicate to people. In my case, it's about these theories and marginalized communities and the psychology of othering and how we treat each other poorly because of our worldviews or meaning systems. So if you have that, I want that to connect too. But I know it's going to be a long stretch for me. I bet I don't get a handful of people that will even read my book when I publish it. Chris says it reminds me of some of the guys Quinn and I used to work with. Yes, yeah, lots of time. Yes, exactly, Chris. That's it. Spot on. That's exactly right. And there's nothing wrong. I don't want to, and I know Chris isn't belittling this either. There's nothing wrong with doing that. We're just trying to say there's a difference, right? There's a difference in intention. One has the intention of making money or seeking fame and glory or whatever it might be in addition to money. And the other one is this personal struggle with this ontological or existential question of what the hell am I doing? Why am I here? What am I doing? What's going on with all these people? What's this, right? And making work about that. What I'm trying to do is trying to define it a little further in psychological terms. I'm not trying to become a scientist or a psychologist or a life coach or none of that. I'm trying to, in front of you, give you my working model of what I'm trying to do and see if I can execute it. I don't even know if I can execute it, to be honest with you. I don't know. I don't know if I can, right? So if I get into this program next year and I work through this and I connect with the right people, I will go, you know, my personal fine art, just like it's always been, will now be in public in some form or fashion. I don't know what it'll be, but anyway, what do you guys? Anything else, guys? Let's chat about something that's on your mind. What's on your mind? Anything?
Yeah, I'll say something. I'll say how this has really helped me a lot because you know, Quinn, that I'm just really getting started.
Yes.
In the collodion.
Yes.
And it's really helped me a lot because when I first started thinking about getting into it, my mind was thinking that way. I bought like some old used lights and stuff, and I was like, well, I'll set up my living room to take portraits, and I'll have people come to my house, and you know, no. It's like, no, I just can't do it. I can't go that way. I mean, all the lights and the crap I bought are sitting in a corner. Fortunately, I got it used, so I didn't spend a lot. But yeah, this has helped me a lot because I just don't want to go out there and just do something like you said, copying somebody or whatever. But that's also where, and I've written you several emails about this block that I've had, because when you want to do something so different, it's hard to figure it out what you want to do. It's like, does that make sense to you guys? Do you struggle with the same thing? You want to do something different, but it's not coming to you right away. It's starting to come to me a little bit, but this, I appreciate you doing this a lot, Quinn, because
thank you, Bernadette. I appreciate
it really has helped me look at it differently, look at it in a deeper sense. I made money before with a Hasselblad and lights like this and crap doing weddings, and I think I told you I'd just rather just chew glass or chew my leg off now than do that.
We don't want to derogate wedding photographers, but no.
Oh no, I mean, I know some great ones, and I worked with.
Yeah, no, I know there's nothing wrong with
me and helped me. I mean, he's an incredible portrait photographer, but and I went that way at first.
Yeah. Well, that's I understand the desire to God, we our culture just says make money. If you don't make money, what are you doing, right?
Well, yeah, exactly. And now my dilemma is I have to be able to afford to do this because I sunk all my savings into my equipment, and as I told you, a kit.
Yeah.
I didn't know, even though I got your book, like I told you, got your book like 8 years ago when I first started thinking about doing this. And then I got your book again. When I ordered your book the second time, it says you ordered this book in 2000 and whatever the hell it was.
Oh, wow. Well, I appreciate that. Speaking of commercial ventures, right? I do appreciate the sales of books. I mean, if I don't sell any more books, okay, I don't sell any more. I'm not, people think I'm competing in these areas. I'm not. I want to help people. I want to help.
I know, and I think we all really, really appreciate that. I mean, even though I'm a little late coming in, I've watched.
No, nobody's
late. Your videos that I like, that I did not know, and I just found them actually like yesterday or the day before on your blog that you did when you were doing the Madison Avenue.
Oh,
Those 3 videos. I was like blown away by those 3 videos.
Oh, thank you. What blew you away? What blew you away about them?
Because they just made made me. It's so hard to describe.
Yeah.
They were just, to me, they were so well crafted. I liked the background music. I liked that you took the time to talk to these people as if they were just, didn't have anything wrong. You were just trying to get to their, I felt like I was seeing their souls in those videos.
I appreciate
that. And I just thought that they were amazing, but I hadn't found them. I've been watching all your technical stuff.
Yeah.
And then I found these like really artistic things, and I'm like, man, this is so cool.
I appreciate that. I've had people write me and say, oh, I didn't even know you were an artist. I thought you were a technician.
I mean, how long ago were those? They were a long time ago, right?
2002, 2003, maybe.
Yeah.
They're in 4x3 format, so that should say something about them.
No, I just thought they were just, and here's the thing too. Even though now they look dated because of the technology, now they look like they should be now because people are trying to get that look when they're doing videos.
Yeah, what you just said there, Bernadette, was beautiful, and I greatly appreciate it. What you said was exactly what I was trying to do with those. Wet Collodion, and I've mentioned this many times, has given me a way in to connect with humanity. That I've been a portrait photographer for 40 years, right? I mean, well, I'm not that well. Close to 40 years I have been, and I've never had the actual process deliver to me something so profound. So when I started, at the turn of the century, I found this process and I started dabbling in it and I started mingling, messing with it. And I started making these portraits of people, and it took so long, and it was so intricate, and it's frozen, and just and bringing them in and having them develop the plate with me. And it was just so powerful. They'd never seen. I've had people cry, shed tears in the darkroom watching their portrait come up. And I said, you're emotional about this? Yes, I look, I look like my great grandfather. I look like there's something there was punctum in that image that pierced that sitter to the point where it was emotional. Mm-hmm. And so these videos, and thank you for mentioning it, I appreciate that. These videos were my attempt to show abstractly the humanity in people that we derogate and belittle and push aside and torment because they're not normal. They've done something wrong. And these are all cultural constructs. And that's what those videos were trying to say is this process is just like this video. It's intimate. And I actually consider the plate, I've said this before, I consider the art, the interaction with the sitter and the actual humanity. And I consider the plate as the residue of that interaction. Right. So the plate is an afterthought. It's kind of like Roland Barthes, right? This is a has-been. This has happened. I was interested in the interaction, the humanity, and feeling the people that I photographed. And they were some pretty marginalized community, pretty marginalized people, sex offenders, amputees, felons, heroin addicts, people that have just had a rough time in life and haven't been dealt an equal hand. Hey, Chopper! It feels to me that if an artist can put in writing their thoughts and meaning of an artistic expression before making the art, this might make the process even more meaningful and easier to explain. 100%. And I was going to do it, and I may do this, Chopper. I was thinking about this a couple of weeks ago. We can do a segment on artist statements, and we can kind of deconstruct those. They get such a bad rap. I don't know how many times I've heard people, I don't need an artist statement. Picasso didn't have one. Oh my God, ad nauseum, right? And so, no, you don't need an artist statement. You can put your work out there and roll the dice, and hopefully people get it. If they're Roses and Barnes and El Capitan, you won't have any problem. But if they're a little more complex, you're going to have some problem. And I love writing. I love writing. I think everybody should write. I think everybody should practice that as an artist. And totally agree with you, Chopper. Great point. And Michael says, I feel your pain, Bernadette. Yes, and Michael wrote me, Bernadette, and he really complimented you a few weeks ago on your coming out with, kind of disclosing your struggles with both the artistic struggle and your life experiences sometimes too. I feel your pain, Bernadette, while I enjoy making pretty pictures. Yeah, I like the chocolate box pictures. I prefer to do work that has some meaning, but I struggle to find what that is. Ooh, that's why you're here. I love hearing that. It seems like my mind is blocking me. The only thing that's blocking you is your culture, is your meaning system, and where you've put that meaning system in your culture. So what you don't want is existential guilt that we just talked about. And so this is the problem people run into all the time. Many workshops I've done, and my workshop, Jeffrey's been to a workshop, not my personal workshop. That was kind of a commercial workshop in Vancouver, but still, I hope I talked about this, Jeffrey, and maybe you can remind us. I try to, especially in small, personal, private workshops. My workshops were about creating art as much as the process itself. That's what I always tried to include. And I've had people ask me, where are you coming up with all these ideas to make photographs of this and talk about that? My life, right? I'm deconstructing my life, what's happened in my life and where my interests lie. And my interests happen to be in human behavior, psychology, and why people treat the way people treat people who are different from them so poorly. Why we have terrible thoughts about people who are different from us, why we don't want to pay attention to them, just like Bernadette talked about the people in my videos, right? Man, she's an amputee, or he's a sex offender, or he's drooling, or I don't want to sit by, I don't want any of this stuff. Like, that person should be locked up. That person should be put away, right? So we have what I'm trying to do is arouse these moral questions, right? Is this really the right thing to do to fellow human beings in our culture? I mean, is this right? Is this what we should be doing? And if it's not, why are we doing this? And if it's not, can we change that? Those are the questions that I wrestle with. Now, the art made around that can be some abstract little 10-minute painting, or a very elaborate, well-lit, large portrait, glass plate, 16 by 20. Whatever the situation calls for, that's the pursuit I take. So I only try to work in what I feel more comfortable with, and I definitely feel comfortable with making photographs. I feel comfortable with pushing those around a little bit, and I feel comfortable somewhat with painting. It's naive, it's all that stuff, but I still enjoy it, and it still has something to say. Beautiful. Let's do one. I had that on my books a couple of weeks ago. We'll do one. We'll try to deconstruct. Jeffrey, you wanted to get in here, brother. Talk to us.
Oh, I just wanted to bring up earlier when I think it was Michael was mentioning about Sally Mann, and you had mentioned about the gallery pricing. Just going back, I'm not sure if the intention of when Sally made those work, it was to actually to sell. Because usually the galleries are the one that, they put a price, and then of course they take a cut as well. I'm not sure whether it's still 70-30 or 50-50.
It varies gallery to gallery. I've had them 50-50. I've had them 60-40 even, so yeah. That's a great point, Jeffrey. And I would gamble if you were to talk to her and say, Sally, when you made the photographs of the Civil War scenes, the Civil War battlefields, remember that tree with a scar in it? Oh my God. If that doesn't just melt you, I mean, oh my God, right? I don't think, this is 20 grand. No, I don't think she was doing that. No.
That was actually the first image. It was in I was still a student. I had gone down with our class for an exhibition down in Seattle, to the Seattle Art Museum and a few other galleries in that area.
Yeah.
I remember there was a magazine, not magazine, like sort of a magazine on some art. I can't remember the title of it, but I still have it. And that image was the one on the cover. When I looked at it, I couldn't figure what, because it just looks so, I don't even know how to describe it. It just really caught me. I'm just like, what is this? I remember looking at the images inside. They had other landscape, and so it was those images actually you're talking about. Yeah. And I was just like, ever since that was like 99, 2000, I think it was.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. You're right. Yeah. That image is almost like a painting, right? Yeah. Almost just unreal in a way. Yeah. I don't know if painting's the right word for it, but she I'm sure Sally Mann is a hard. She may get offended if she ever heard me say this. I'm not sure though, but she's a hardcore existentialist. I'm an existentialist. She's a hardcore existentialist. I mean, her work, smack on death, anxiety, and terror management. Absolutely 100% all the way. I do not think she was thinking about making money with that work. My point was afterward as well too, the gallery, what that does to the viewing public, she has nothing to do with that probably, or not much, or maybe she does, I don't know. But just that notion changes the attitude, even if the artist isn't doing that, and she's got more money than God, and she's blah blah blah. It changes that. It didn't change my attitude at all. I was just talking about the general public seeing those numbers on prints, silver gelatin prints in the Gascogne, and that was 20 years ago or more, maybe. I don't know how long ago it was. So yeah, good point. Thanks for sharing that, Jeffrey. Yeah. Chopper says, do many photographer artists work with novelists who make art to be published with a specific fictional novel? That's a great question, Chopper. Do you know, not my intention, but do you know that I've had 2 covers of books for my wet colloding images, and I've also had a large commissioned painting by, it doesn't matter. from my work. Not seeking any of it, right? Two French novels. One was French, a French novel, a fiction novel, and they used a portrait of Kylie. She was my studio assistant for many years. I photographed her all the time. She had big long dreadies and stuff, and then the other one was a historical book, and they wanted images for that. And I've given a lot of consultation on books. Here's Chopper. Let me say, and anybody else can jump in here. The problem with this notion, there's nothing wrong with it, but again, what vein in those three categories? What vein do you think this question would fall in? Would it be personal fine art? Would it be craftsman technician, or would it be commercial artist over here? So how many photographers work with novelists to make art to be published with a specific fictional novel? So when this French person contacted me and she said, this is a story I'm writing, blah, 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 blah. And I would love to, this is about a woman, blah, blah, blah. And I would love to include your photograph. Well, I had no intention of Kylie's portrait ending up on the front of a fiction novel in France at the time. And somebody sent me, they were in a bookstore and they saw that image of Kylie on the book and they said it was cool. But anyway, my point is this: I had no intention. This would be a commercial venture because this is outside of you. You're being directed by someone to be creative. You have the technical skills, you have the craftsmanship, whatever. So they're saying, hey, this is about a young woman who's struggling here in the arts district in Paris, and she has this and that. And you say, oh yeah, I got you here. I can think something up for that. That didn't come from you. That came externally. And you're getting paid to do that. You're a technician or a craftsman. And yes, you employ some, quote, artistic skills for creative lighting or composition or all those kinds of things. Chopper said the novel would become the artist's statement was my thinking. The novel. Okay, well, you know what? We will do a segment on artist statements. In fact, we should probably do it next time or include it at least a little bit, because I think artist statements get a bummer rap. And I think this is the beginning of understanding. If you've never been to art school, if you've never been trained or educated in the arts, and it doesn't matter if you were or not, it just sometimes it helps for context and words and ideas and things like that. That's the only thing. Nobody's dumb or stupid or whatever if you didn't go to university or whatever. It doesn't matter. The question here is how do you parlay your words and your ideas into words to the general public, be authentic, be real, and then execute work in service of those ideas. Now, I've said many, many times, and Jeffrey's been through this with me, you can navigate on making a body of work and all the pitfalls you come through there. I always encourage people to work in projects, work with an idea, make a painting, make a photograph, make a drawing, make a sculpture, make a piece of music, do a piece of writing in service of those ideas, and keep doing that and keep doing it, keep doing it. And look, if we can get a steady group in here, I would love to come in and have people present their ideas and work as we go through this stuff, as we go like, hey, this is an idea I had, last time we were talking about this and I came up with this idea. Throw a piece of work together. I might show you one next week while we talk about statements and stuff. But anything you want to do, technically, I've already offered this to Bernadette and Chris if you want. I'm so willing to help technically in service of, if you want to do if you're mainly interested in commercial work, this is probably not the show you want to hang out at, because I'm talking more about theories and ideas and concepts than, hey, I made $100 on this plate kind of thing. But nothing wrong with that. I always have to say that because people get pissed and my email lights up saying, oh, God, you're so anti. What's wrong with the tintype pop-up? Nothing wrong with the tintype pop-up. Nothing wrong with it. It's like apples and elephants to me. We're just talking about two different things in my mind. That's all. So if you're interested in this stuff, come back and join us every week. And I'll try to be here the best I can. So, okay. Christian Johansson. Artist statement would be an interesting. You got it. We'll do it. That's it. I love this when this can come together and you say, hey, this is what we want to talk about. I got time in the week. I'll put together a nice little piece on statements and I'll show you some of mine and bring yours. I would love for you to share an artist statement next week. If you have an artist statement, please come and read it to us because we can deconstruct these ideas. We can deconstruct yours personally. You can deconstruct mine, and we can kind of share these ideas. I would love to have this as a group of, peers and like-minded people coming in and sharing information. Hope nothing to do with money. I know I have a book. I'm not trying to sell my book. I'm trying to quote sell these ideas of getting in touch with your existential self and consciously making work from that point. And I agree with Sheldon. Don't get fixated on Becker's ideas. Too late. But do, and I'm getting over that. It's been several years. I'm starting to mellow a little bit and see. I was a fanboy for many years. I still am. But get over that and start making work in service. Settle stuff. Make us work for it. Make us think about it. You're writing, you're sculpting, painting. It doesn't have to be photography. If it is, great. If it's wet clothing, super, awesome. I love it. But doesn't have to be. We'll look at any expression. Think about existentialism. Next week, we'll do artist statements. You guys on board for that? I hope. Yeah, cool. Bring your statement, and we'll do it. Anything else before we call it a day? Anything. I hope everybody's doing well. You all look terrific. And I love all of you. You're wonderful people. I really do. I wish you the very best. Have a wonderful week. Have a great weekend. I don't know. What am I going to do today? I might continue painting. I think I'll continue painting a little bit. So we'll see you next Saturday. Thank you so much for joining us.
Cheers.
And all you YouTubers too. Thank you.